What's up?
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Maybe it's this one that can turn on.
All right. And then everybody or anybody over on the Twitch side of things, I got the in the pinned comment, I got the link for the live stream. So if you would like to have your comment highlighted, especially for discussion and things like that, just be sure to make sure you're lurking on both. And I might, if you don't lurk, that's fine. I do read the Twitch chat. And I might ask you to be like, hey, that was a really good comment or a good point. You should go drop that on there so I can highlight that. Now, Chris, is something I'd like to test at some point in the future because I can link this software to Twitch. The only thing is I don't know if it will affect your stream personally. And maybe we can test that out this week when we're both like, hey, we're going to try this out and see if it like messes with your stream at all. And if it does, then we know. But if it doesn't, and I'm able to actually see both Twitch and YouTube, then we should be good to go from there. So good morning. Good morning. How's your stream? How's the progress on Deep Dungeon going for you so far?
It's going good. I'm starting to just build up Aether Pool. So now it's just about building up nice saves with lots of Pomander so I can make another push. So today will be just like a prep day. There's a lot of prep. There's a lot of just like the grind portion. So it's kind of like a relic in that way where there's these big payoff moments, but you've worked very hard to get there. So today's kind of a prep day. So I don't expect to exceed floor 32 today at all. I was busy chatting and reading chat, and I died in a mid clear. And then you get nothing.
You need to track how many times chat gets you killed versus that. Just because I love stats on stats. So anything and everything is always fun. So I'll try to add into that. So like, all right, guys, he's making it too far. We got to get him. We got to take him out. All right. Are you ready? Are you ready to dive in? Because I see chat already talking about the topic.
I'm ready.
Really good. Okay. So today's topic, and I'm going to highlight Mitchell's comment here, but we last week we're talking about all the conversation going on within the Final Fantasy XIV community, and I had a bunch of little topics kind of broken out, and thus we weren't able to get to everything. So we figured we'd pick it up today and continue it on. Is Final Fantasy XIV or 16's development actually hurting Final Fantasy XIV is our main topic. And Mitchell, he writes, other than Yoshi P's time, I'm curious what ways the devs have shared resources. According to interviews, it also seems like it's a pretty normal for team members to be allowed to shift projects. And I would echo, it's actually, I think, critical for them to be allowed to shift projects. Because just imagine you being at work, not happy because you'd like to do something other than what you're constantly working on for years and years and years. You're going to lose that resource. That resource is going to go find someplace else where they're happy or well satisfied. So it's not about like, you want your team to be able to say, hey, I would like to work on this. And that's essentially a really healthy sign of a company that's willing to continue to develop resources that can kind of fall in and fill that gap. But what do you think, Chris? Is Final Fantasy 16, is the development hurting Final Fantasy 14? This is what we've seen echoed online like all last week.
So the only reason this is coming up is because there's people that are unhappy with 635. Because this kind of Final Fantasy 14, Final Fantasy 16 tax, as it's kind of been referred to, where there's additional, either we're borrowing people, we're taking people, people are splitting their time. It's a tax on Final Fantasy 14's content to produce Final Fantasy 16. That tax has been leveraged for many years now. As they've become more and more transparent about how long this has been going on, that tax has been in place for many years now. But when Shadowbringers was good, when the release of Endwalker was good, nobody worried about the tax because even post-tax, there was plenty of meat on the bone. But for anybody that does not enjoy Deep Dungeon and does not enjoy crafting and gathering, 6.35 is very light. Now, if you like either of those systems, you may find that you're not done yet. I mean, the average crafter relic, if you bought all the materials, is still an hour. And you have the Loppery tribals. The average crafter gatherer relic is a little bit longer. If you're gathering your materials, that can all be a great deal longer. Yeah. Deep Dungeon in a 4-man is very manageable, but it's still going to take some time. The solo grind is very real and will take quite a bit of your time, unless you're somebody who's just outrageously good at deep dungeon. And even those people, I mean, they're just now, we're just now seeing large amounts of clears come through. The first clear was very fast, but it's not like it just immediately, as soon as they cleared it, everybody was soloing to 100. So I think across the board, like, that's why this has come up. Is I don't think that the tax has been any more severe now than it was in Shadowbringers, early Shadowbringers. I mean, my understanding is that this tax was leveraged in Stormblood, and Stormblood was the densest expansion we've ever had as far as content cycle, as far as patch cadence and patch content. Stormblood sets the bar, and Shadowbringers, people were largely happy with the amount of content. There was frustration in where it was leveraged. Like, I wish they wouldn't put so much in Bosja's Adnor, or I wish they wouldn't put. So there was frustration with where it went, but there was not frustration with quantity.
Yeah, I think there's a pattern that's established, and it's a pattern easily forgotten, because I would say, from being a part of the community for so long, the 0.3 patch has historically been met with the most general frustration, because usually I think that's historically from a level of just like, finishing the story, burnout overall. Like, these are things that happen year over year, like, expansion over expansion. What it ends up being, though, is that I think there's a part of it that's players themselves are surprised by it, because they don't yet understand it. They're either coming out of a honeymoon phase, or they're like, yeah, I loved it, and I played the last expansion, and then I went right into the next, or I've been getting caught up, and so there's just been so much new, and then all of a sudden, within the current expansion, story's kind of been finished, you've kind of done all these things, and then you're left wanting more game to play. I was talking with Chili about this years ago, and I think essentially the core issue is that for those players is that they're looking for something to keep them engaged. They want to play more. That's not it's nothing wrong with that. But the offering that they're looking for that would keep them engaged is unfortunately like on the way. Like, that's the solution. We know that 6.4 is on the way. That's going to have not just a new raid series for people to kind of tackle. That's also going to have the most return on your investment of your time for your gear. So if you're pouring in so much time into the O's, the 2s, that obviously offsets with the 1s and the 3s, you're going to end up feeling like, oh, all that work is kind of reset, and now the 4s is going to take you all the way into the next expansion and more, unless for some reason they change up that process. And then year over year, I feel like the loudest voices on this are the veterans, and that frustration and that pattern is just like, well, that's the pattern. Now, there are, I feel, some things missing as a non-player anymore, right? One of the things I would call back to is we've also seen them do various different collaboration events, usually around this time. This is where you got the Rathlos fight-ish. This is also when you maybe saw the Yokai Watch come back, ish. We've seen that, return. And sometimes those events also can kind of give that player that sense of connection. And we're not necessarily seeing that. We haven't really seen any collaboration event within the world of 14. So there are things that maybe somebody was looked to, or maybe that just kind of helped, as a kind of an aloe to the burn, ended up just kind of being a good, placement. We do know the Moogle, treasure trove event is going to be on the way, and you most likely have the date already for the Moogle event, as we're getting ready to start into that next cycle. But I think the other side of this, and I'd love to know your thoughts, and also make sure we highlight some of the comments from Chad, is that from a marketing perspective, the marketing and the news and the information is going to be 16 driven. We know that Yoshi P's got Koji, he's got Soken. The team that built Heavensward is the team that's building 16. We know that those are those resources, and they can ebb and flow within the projects themselves. And I'm glad that that team is getting the crack at 16. But it's going to be interesting, because 16, I think, no matter what, being that it's only on PS5, it's going to have there's going to be some frustration. So we're going to probably see this topic and this frustration kick in again sometime after the hype of 16 kind of wears off. What do you think?
I think that's that's the other part of this is like this feels like 6.35 kind of stubbed the community's toe, and that absolutely hurts, and like it would absolutely be a reason for me to say foul language and shout at the moon, but I know it's going to pass. Like I know that if you just stubbed your toe, you didn't like rip the toenail off or anything like that, that an hour from now it's going to be fine.
Yeah,
you know, you didn't break anything, it just hurt, and that's it's valid to say that this hurt. It's valid so that they can listen to that. But when we were talking about it this morning on stream, you know, there was kind of this question of like, is it sustainable? Is there something wrong? Do we need to be concerned of something bigger, more systematic? Was kind of the general sentiment, and I would say no, because it's one patch, and we know what odd numbered patches are, and we know what even numbered patches are, and all of this is going to blow over when it's 6.4 and we're staring down the barrel at FanFest. The 6.3 cycle is also a time that it can feel really emotional because we don't have anything better to talk about. And so it's when you start getting streamers arguing about chairs. It's when you start having Twitlongers about 2 healers in one 8-man group that becomes a discussion point across the internet. And all of that is like, it would mean nothing if we'd gotten a new job reveal at the same time. And so like come 6.4, even if the content was of identical quality, identical quantity, and was focused at the same players, because the people who don't like Deep Dungeon aren't necessarily the people who don't like what'll come in 6.4. If you like Savage and not Deep Dungeon, that's a valid way to play this game. But that makes 6.3.5 very frustrating, and that makes 6.4.1 very exciting. And so it's going to vary. Everybody is in some stage of, I like this thing, I wish this thing was different, I don't care about that thing. And it's rotating which people are upset. It's just right now, it really, 6.3.5 is really honed in on a couple of play styles. And if you don't fall into one of those buckets, then you're stuck with 6.3. And 6.3 really honed in on a couple of play styles. But when we get into the 6.4 cycle and we go back to supporting Island Sanctuary, we go back to supporting Criterion, the trust system starts finishing. For people that want to do re-story clears, that'll be MSQ of Stormblood. So we'll be almost done with duty support, being all the 4-mans. We'll have new MSQ again. We'll have new normal raids again. We'll have new Savage again. We'll have updates to all these systems. We're looking down at some point. We believe we're getting more Blue Mage. Like there are things around the corner. So I don't think it's a question about whether or not 6.3.5 is like a long-term problem for you. It is valid if you want to play right now and you can't play. That's very frustrating.
How much also is being in competition with other games that are out there, right? Because every one of us has a, kind of a budget of time that we can toss into things. And a lot of people that I feel are frustrated want to put more time in this bucket, or there's, I don't know, I don't have a term for it, but wanting to then maybe go play the new Destiny expansion, or maybe wanting to go play, the Elden Ring, game that maybe they missed out on last year or something like that. Like, how much do you feel like other things that are being more also prevalent in the news, like this is obviously focusing on 16, has that level of impact? Because if everybody's talking about X and you're like, hey, come back here, this is the conversation, please. Do you feel like that might be having any kind of impact?
I think it could feel very lonely if you feel like you want to play Final Fantasy 14 and you're frustrated with Final Fantasy 14, and everybody you go to vent your frustration to is like, well, I'm fine because I'm playing Destiny.
Right.
Like that would make you feel very alone. On its own, I don't think it really matters. But like, if you really want to go to a restaurant and that restaurant's closed, and all your friends are like, well, that's fine, I want to go to a different restaurant anyway. Like, that's just a really lonely feeling. And so when you see, your favorite streamer streaming a different game, when you see, your favorite YouTube channel's not uploading, when you reach out to the friends of your static and they're off doing raids in a different game, then now you're stuck with your frustration, and there's nobody there to kind of help balance that out. Hey, well, I'm having a lot of fun doing the Elpis maps right now. Have you tried those? Oh no, I hadn't. And like there's none of those things that would traditionally bring you out of a funk. Because there's a lot of things from 6.3 that I don't think everybody got to. And the half patch is a continuation of the main patch. They act as a cycle. So the 0.3 cycle is a whole thing. And that includes 0.1, where Ultimate unlocked. That includes 0.8, where Savage will unlock, which is historically in recent history is 4 weeks after the half patch. And so for people that really like Savage, for the first week, they're just hanging out, doing story and doing normal. Then they go into Savage. After 7 weeks of Savage, the half patch comes out and they have something to mix their time up with. And after another 4 weeks, week 11, after that, now they're looking at having unlocked Savage, or plus the previous cycle. So 11 weeks into this cycle, I've got that math wrong. Yeah, so you've got like 11 weeks into this patch cycle, they can start farming Savage at a new degree.
Yeah.
Now it's an old fight at that point because it's from the previous cycle. So that they're farming the 0.2 raid 11 weeks into 0.3. 12 weeks, whatever that math is. And so like there are these different stage starts where you can't do anything and then you can. So if you were waiting on something in the half patch, that's a really common frustration. The half patch is going to have new relic step, or the half patch is going to have new Hildebrand, or whatever it is you're excited about. Patch day gets here. You've heard about it in the live letter. Where is it? Oh, it's 8 weeks from now? What the hell?
Yeah.
And we see that frustration regularly when something is super exciting and it gets kicked out to the half patch. It's talked about like it's all coming day and date, and it's just not.
Now, Austin brings up this point, and we're going to jump into the comments here. Says, I think that the development with graphics updates is actually making everything solo is the tax that we're seeing. And see Strifefall is to stop talking about, yes, they've remade a lot of this, like zones in the dungeons, prey, cast, adding in the trust system. And I think this is something that, if y'all haven't heard me say this, one of the things that I was saying that if they would go back and work on these systems, it takes probably 5-10 times as much effort to make these sweeping and bigger changes. That's one of the things within development, is that all of a sudden you're going back into some of these older systems, and it's necessary work. But it's work that is not as fast as it is if they just added it in the expansion. So when you saw the changes to the fate system in Storm, in Shadowbringers, you didn't see that change roll into Stormblood or Heaven's Word. At some point, maybe that change does roll into those systems, but it is easier for them to put that into the expansion rather than go into the core and actually make that change. And so that in and of itself is probably a bigger tax that is happening, because I feel like 16 is stealing from 14 in a lot of ways. We talked about marketing, we talked about in the resources that moved over, but that's not a bad thing. That's actually what you want to have happen. The team did not get smaller within Final Fantasy 14. It's not like, hey, we have a team of 100 people or whatever that number is. Now you're down to 50 and now you're going to support 2 games. That didn't happen. In fact, when you look at Luminous closing, if anything else, like, you're going to see probably more available resources to work on the wide range of projects that they're working on. I think the bigger thing to kind of wonder about that all was going down last week and the previous week is what is going on with Square Enix. We talked about that as a specific topic with the CEO being replaced. Maybe that's a good thing. We'll have to wait and see in the long run. Their constant march towards the NFT projects without showing anything, and something supposedly coming this spring. We don't know if that's still going to be a case. So sometimes it does feel like, to me, like outside of the business division 3, that there's a lot of weirdness at the company, a lot of irons in the fire, or maybe not a clear necessary direction, or maybe that, they're just waiting for the whole Microsoft Activision Blizzard thing to close, so Sony goes ahead and picks them up. And who knows, like, what ultimately is going on behind the scenes right now. And I think that probably is having kind of a bigger level of frustration. And then also with Square Enix, from a marketing perspective, like, it does pose a challenge that with their games and their releases, that try not to market and step on their own announcement and hype with it within the space. And so there's definitely, I think, a valid critique having going on into the conversation. But the thing about 16, though, is that outside of releasing on other platforms, it's not another games as a service. It's not now that game is constantly being developed. The question that we have is what happens after 16, in that regards, because what's the team going to go work on? And is that going to be a new MMO? Is it going to be a new single player Final Fantasy? And I think as we saw a lot of, interesting chat talking about, with the graphics update and that task, once that's done and accomplished, those resources can be then applied to elsewhere in the game itself, and everybody gets to benefit from that overall visual fidelity increase. Any thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up some things with what's going on in the background. There are the trust updates, the you know, the graphics overhaul. These things are all going on in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So that costs something. But ultimately, like, to just bring it back into perspective, I would say the single biggest difference between Shadowbringers and Endwalker is that at this point in Shadowbringers, we got an exploratory zone, and at this point in Endwalker, we got a deep dungeon. In Stormblood, we had both. In Heavensward, we just had a deep dungeon. So we have now seen it every combination.
Heavensward as a counterpoint to that, that's not true. They had the exploratory zone, but they had to keep redoing it. So it came out
a weird place.
Yeah, exactly. So like Diadem was a weird place, but yes, I get what you're going with in terms of what we know the content to be now.
So as we know things to be now, like the 0.3 patch, it's really just the exploratory, and so I think a lot of that comes down to the relic step. So if we're going to try to vent our frustration, I don't think it's that 0.35 didn't have enough content types. I think it's that we had to grind the exact same currency and not in a crazy quantity for both of the relic steps thus far. If the average person came up with, you know, a certain amount of seals from hunts or bicolor gemstones from fates or something like that while farming up 1,500 tomes of astronomy, and they had literally just swapped the currency, I think this whole thing would feel better. The fact that it is literally an identical step feels lazy. Even if it was like actually in reality an identical amount of player effort and an identical amount of dev effort, the fact that they didn't switch it to being bicolor, the fact that they didn't tie it to the criterion variant system, the fact that they didn't switch it to seals from hunts or, you know, something like Moogle Tomestones, where you just did a variety of things across the game and they yielded a new currency that you could just buy this with. It feels lazy. And when you put that with the fact that this expansion, we have had a huge Tomestone pinch. We have used Tomestones for relics. We have used Tomestones for raid consumables. We have used Tomestones for relics again. We farmed Tomestones for the Moogle Tomestone events, which have had people really interested in those. They're not new, but it just, and then when you're on the crafting side, it feels like everything just costs white scripts. So these kind of uncapped tomes has been the go-to grind this expansion. And at a certain point, that go-to grind being an uncapped Tomestone, no matter what it's called, it starts to feel a lot alike. And it starts to be, oh, you just want me to do the same thing again. Looking forward into the future and realizing we're about to go back into a Moogle Tomestone event leading into patch 6.4, which will be a brand new eye level, which will put us back on a new Tomestone grind. So we are Tomestone grinding before Tomestone grinding before Tomestone grinding. So we're about the Tomestone grind going into 6.4, which will be a Tomestone grind. So at a certain point, it just starts to feel fatiguing. So I would say that's the other note on this. Is like, it's fair to note what's going on in the background, but also note that, like, we as the players are also just tired. It wouldn't matter what they gave us. If it's another Tomestone grind, it's going to be lackluster.
Yeah, and usually what ends up happening after this fatigue, this just general player exhaustion, is you get the 0.4 patch and then you kick on the 7.0 hype, because all of a sudden that's where the focus is, because they are working on 7.0. They are working on all these various different things. And that apparently is going to obviously kick in. You're going to get the trailers. You're going to get the hype. You're going to get the speculation. You're going to get the discussion. What jobs? Okay, what do we think it is? What's Yoshi P's shirt, etc. So then it just kicks into that season, that bigger hype fest. And one of the things that, just from an analytics perspective alone, every year you put whatever number in point of that 0.3, and you're talking about the lowest numbers overall, which is a part of the problem that Chris and I have talked about for years. Is the incentive structure within the YouTube, within the algorithms themselves, and the increasing time between the patches now just gives that opportunity for that, that FFXIV drama, to become the be all end all. And I even seen people like, why do we always talk about the drama? Like, that in and of itself is the same thing, complaining about the drama posts, making the drama posts, like, it's all attention. It's all that sense to be like, this is what is being talked about. This is what the feeling is. And I don't have a solution for it unless we decided to completely fundamentally change how all these algorithms truly impact our lives. But it is, it is almost, you could set a watch to it. I mean, Chris has a spreadsheet, and the joke I made this morning while he was kind of talking about the whole chair scenario was literally you could actually probably make a category in your spreadsheet to predict like when is the drama going to hit the fan,
which is Wednesday.
Yeah, which is Wednesday. It's like absolutely. So that's it's weird because this isn't a 14 issue. In that case, that becomes a bigger thing. I was talking with Joker about that regarding Destiny. It's like it becomes just an issue within these persistent games that have these patterns, and the frustration of new players and veteran players, the honeymoon phases, and so the defenders and the attackers. It is almost kind of like this dance that we continue to have on and on and on.
It's nice that the content's optional. It's nice that the game is meant to welcome you to drop in and out. It is frustrating that the occasional bad patch cycle, 7 or 8 months ago, I made a video, and in that video, as a point of example, I said, imagine there's a patch cycle that's not your thing. And as an example, so that I could talk more like down here on Earth with real examples, I just picked a patch out of my spreadsheet at random. I didn't say it was a good or bad patch. I just said, let's use this one as the hypothetical because it's real and we can talk about what's in it. And people were like, but that wasn't a bad patch. And it's like, okay, well, now we're in one that people do feel is bad. So this is a much better example. So as 6.35, if it is a bad cycle, what's frustrating about that is if you don't want to take breaks, being told that you can drop in and out is not the same. You're being told to drop in and out. You're being told, no, you should just take a break right now. I don't want to take a break. I want to like the game. Why aren't you letting me like the game? So I think people's feelings are very valid. I would say that make sure you've tried all the content. People who have not cleared the first 30 floors of Eureka Orthos, people who have not tried ever a crafting relic, people who have not tried ever a battle relic, have never completed Hildy. They've never done a tribal quest, especially any of the crafting ones. Go give Lopper Eats a shot. So I would say, like, before you quit, I understand it's frustrating that you walked into the restaurant and they don't have the favorite thing you want to order, but try ordering something different before just walking out the door mad. It's possible there's a silver lining to this, that you end up liking something you never knew you liked. But, the great thing about Final Fantasy XIV is to know that the pain can only last so long. It's only a stubbed toe with Final Fantasy. There are MMOs that sometimes go a year without patches or more. And just imagine if the patch cycle was something that you didn't like, and then you had to wait a year. That's not to make you feel better, but it is to kind of put in some perspective that this pain is fleeting. Come 6.4, it's a new set of things to like and dislike. And come 6.45, it's a new set of things to like and dislike. And then we move into FanFest. So now you start having reasons to be excited about Final Fantasy that aren't even gameplay.
Yeah, 100%. The thing that'll be interesting, and my feedback always ends up being, I wish that there was more synergy within the systems. And I think that is essentially where, when you start to think about why should I do these, chat's brought up like the tombstone cost and things like that. There are some synergies. You can do this content and get this currency and use that currency to achieve whatever this goal is, week over week, month over month. But ultimately, like when it comes like deep dungeon and all these things, like to have and again, the idea was always what happens like if you just were given off, a reward for every quote unquote level you get post level 90, just as a way of the system in and of itself isn't giving you power, but it's just there, things that are happening. You have this easily transmutable, kind of flow between all these different systems. That way you can choose the content that you enjoy the most. And, if you won the grind on that as this, option, then you had that ability. And Julie says, I kind of want to make a drama video and set it to publish later on in a few months just to see if it gets the date right. It would be such a funny thing to try and predict what the drama was. Like I would not have guessed there would be drama over Lalafell chairs. And that in and of itself, when I was learning about that this morning, I literally almost did a spit take over my computer just because I was like, interesting. Like, honestly, it's like, if that's our problem, a chair, like, then I think life's pretty dang good. All right. Any final thoughts on that before we switch to our second topic?
No, let's talk about something else.
Yes. All right. One of the things that Chris and I have always been curious about and discussed numerous times has been limited jobs. And one of those limited jobs is the Blue Mage. And when I say one of them, it's the only one that's there, that it continues to be there, year over year so far. And I think that's when talking about the earlier topic that we were talking about with Final Fantasy 16, this kind of, I think, feels kind of a natural kind of connection in terms of content that we just don't know about. We have a prediction model of, like a new level cap increase and this and that, the other thing, but we haven't seen much or any more of that, this discussion in quite a while. And so if you guys are watching this as a VOD, smash like if you like that Blue Mage, and double tap that dislike button. It hasn't been working as of late, so we want to make sure that you're having a good time. Chris, what's going on with Blue Mage? Where do you fall? And especially in relation to kind of the overall theme of today's show.
I like Blue Mage a lot. I like that they have found a way, just like I like the PvP combat system, I like that they have found a way to separate something out and say, I want to explore something, but I don't want it to break old ultimates. I don't want it to break old savages. I don't want it to break upcoming content either. Just the core idea of like, what if we had a job that didn't have to play by the rules? Because at this point, a tank to be added to the game has to have an invuln. They have to have a gap closer. They have to have a ranged attack. They have to have a 1-2-3 combo. They have to have an interrupt. They have to have, and so like before you even talk about what the next tank should be, there's these 20 things they can have and these 20 things they can't have before you even talk theme. And that feels really weird. And so the limited job is a chance to separate yourself from any restrictions that are put on the job system itself so that it functions with the content, both past, present, and future. And so I like it. I think that in the media tour last time, there was a question from a Spanish-speaking content creator that will there be Blue Mage in Endwalker? I didn't see anything about it in the content schedule. And a staff member said there's nothing about it yet, but yes, we expect to update Blue Mage across the course of Endwalker. And that's it. It was never from Yoshi P. It was never made official. It was in the media tour Discord. So I don't have a screenshot of anything. If I did, I don't know that I'd be allowed to distribute it. That it's that unofficial. But within that concept, knowing that Island Sanctuary and Criterion were set to be updated in the 0.4 and 0.5 patch, 0.3 feels like the ideal time to introduce Blue Mage updates. So, I like it, but I question now, when would you introduce it? Do you update it at FanFest? If you're waiting for FanFest, when you update it, do you introduce a second limited job? Because right now the word limited job is a direct translation to the word Blue Mage.
It just means Blue Mage.
And I think limited job does have a different set of implications than Blue Mage. And it would be easier to understand those if we had more than one limited job to see what they have in common.
Yeah, as I pivot slightly, because I want to come back and talk more Blue Mage, because I do want more limited jobs. Gizmo says, hey, do you guys know that you have YouTube commercials running midstream right now? I just got my second commercial break. And I would say no, but that's what we've been saying is coming for a while. YouTube, for the longest time, when all the Twitch, ad drama and frustration was being vented, I would stream over on YouTube for a little bit and YouTube would pop up a message, hey, maybe think about running an ad right now. And I would think that at its core, just so that everybody is very well aware, YouTube and Twitch and all of them want to try to figure out ways to monetize the live content, like YouTube has figured out how to monetize the VOD content. And the fact that that's happening on stream does not surprise me one bit. And I think that we'll see more things like that start rolling out over on those sides of things. So thank you, Gizmo, for confirming what I had been predicting was going to happen for at least, I was going to say, YouTube will turn that on as soon as all the frustration and, Twitch has kind of gotten beaten up a little bit for it. And once that kind of dies down, then they'll be like, all right, let's just turn those on too. Anyway, so Blue Mage. I think essentially the thing that weakens it, the thing that I wish that they would do, Xeno was talking about how even with the gear in a certain patch, even the 3, why don't they just go ahead and unlock it? It's not necessarily being kind of the bigger gate. Yeah, I would think the same thing with Blue. I think when it comes to the content, you're doing Deep Dungeon, let Blue in, let Blue in, just have maybe some, it's not going to do matchmaking or something. I like that Blue can do dungeons. It just can't do matchmaking. And I think the thing that's holding Blue back personally, and any other theoretical Puppet Master or Beast Master or whatever job going on back here that might be hopefully on the way still, would literally be go into Deep Dungeon. I think that would be interesting. I think that'd be unique content to challenge, and just have it in another category. Have it either have its own set of achievements, but have it not apply to the current one. So you're not sitting here devaluing somebody who did a solo clear, in whatever record time, and then somebody comes along in Blue Mage and just absolutely makes it like madness. And if you were worried about it, because
track by job now, so
yeah, okay, good,
handles it.
And then maybe that's then helps set that up here in the future, because like the option should be either open up spell slots as you quote unquote level on the earlier stuff. The newer stuff doesn't really, I think, even have that leveling mechanic. And then if you're going to do that where you're just opening up spell slots, and or just give them a kind of a predefined set. Same thing with PvP. Like PvP is already its own system in and of itself. If you wanted to be a main Blue Mage, like here's your Blue Mage curated set. It's a little bit, I don't think anybody's going to sit here and be just absolutely distraught that they couldn't Blue Mage in, as a curated job in PvP. But that's where I kind of fall in that category. And same thing with the raid, same thing with all that. Like at some point, it does not need to be so far behind the curve. You shouldn't have to wait so long to be able to go into that content, but maybe it's all designed that way so that from an achievement or a mount perspective, that they can kind of design those.
Most of this. So like Deep Dungeon is the weirdest restriction, because a lot of what you're describing is already taken care of in Deep Dungeon.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally just is a high enough level.
Right.
But Deep Dungeon just kind of sorts itself out. The fact that it's missing in action does make me wonder, are they planning on giving it a PvP mode? Are they planning on giving it a buddy, right? Because if you had a secondary class, that's where you start to say, okay, like what can Blue Mage do and what can Blue Mage not do? Does that second class plug in some of its weaknesses? And if it does, are they now so overpowered together that we can start creating achievements for like duoing old savages synced? Is that something that can happen? Like, are we creating such god mode classes that when put together, a puppet master, a beast master, or a musketeer, or any of these speculations, when putting that with Blue Mage, can we now break things? Can we now two-man sync savages? And so like that's where I think Blue Mage really shines, is people who want it to be a standard job. We would have to give up a lot of things that make it truly unique to get there. And so I think that from that standpoint, then if we're not going to let it be a normal job, let's let that weird side of it really fly. Like let's go ahead and let it rip. And so at this point, Blue Mage has been a great initial showing. What's interesting is everything up to 70 was originally kind of planned when they first announced Blue Mage. They had already pre-planned the roadmap. So people kind of made up their mind at level 50 whether or not they liked it. But the 60 edition and the 70 edition were both, at least in part, originally planned at FanFest. When they announced it, they already confirmed that number of abilities. They already knew what the abilities were. They were just going to slow trickle them to us. So the exciting thing about the next Blue Mage update is it's also the first update that in its entirety was not designed and planned to be implemented until after our initial round of feedback. So I'm really excited about what that means for like, okay, then everything we haven't liked about it, everything we have liked about it, what would they do with that information?
Yeah.
Because this is the first round of updates that would be
post their original planning
to respond.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. And that gives me hope. That gets me excited, because same thing though with what you said right at the start, like they need to have a second limited job. And I think that from a system, hey, here's all the feedback we gathered. Here's what we're going to update and change. Them adding it into letting it jump into content. I'm fine, even if it was like a patch or two behind the curve of the normal content flow. Okay, I can get that. But man, I tell you, hands down, like I wish if they were going to study any game, like the Destiny raid scene, where it's like, okay, we're just going to turn these things off, right? For this piece of content, this is what we're shutting down. But that's up for the community to kind of decide and debate, because then it's like, hey, okay, yeah, you have that, but then just maybe we're going to have some select abilities that do not work and respond. And
that's what function. I want the PvP to be. I want the PvP to be on like a weekly or bi-weekly rotator, and they just deal you a set of abilities. and then we see how those play out, and then they deal you a different set of abilities.
Do you think we're still going to see, because Yoshi P kind of talked about like a battle royale blue mage version, and usually when he kind of says these things outside of like, because his role on, Blitzball was we haven't got the right proposal yet. Like they're still trying to figure out like what that is. So he's never sitting here and said, hey, yeah, like, I thought this would be kind of cool. Do you think that like we might actually see like a blue mage battle royale being
It tells me they're throwing around the ideas internally. It doesn't mean it'll make it to game. It's one of the reasons you got to be really careful with like talking about what you're working on, because people assume that then the things that they like will make it to completion. And that's just not a guarantee.
Yeah.
So, it does tell me they're at least looking into it, and they may have some working prototypes internally. It doesn't mean it'll make it to production. And because we don't have things like a PTR or anything like that, we really, all we can do is speculate when we look at stuff like that. Like our ability to data mine and then pull from the future is so limited in Final Fantasy. The one advantage is that it's so predictable. We do have a fair bit of things that we know are coming that they haven't announced, but that's just because of history.
Yeah.
Because in Final Fantasy 14, history very much repeats itself.
Oh, that it does. to a good or a fault. It all is a matter of perspective and what patch that they're on. Now, at this point, I want to say thank you so much to Lunar Systems, gifting on a sub over there. 65 gifted subs over here on Twitch. Thank you, Lunar. And Farmer Girl, obviously like I think the leader of gifted subs. So be sure to hang out over on Twitch on occasion, guys. Especially if you want to get those gifted subs, I believe they have it prioritizing, like on the randoms to go out to people who watch or who are live. But we were debating that like this weekend. While
Lunar and Farmer Girl gives specifically to people that chat that don't have a badge. So they specifically give people who are here to be part of the conversation an ad previewing experience.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit different,
which is
incredibly generous.
Which is, as then we learned, apparently YouTube, the only way to have an ad free viewing experience is to have like YouTube Premium in this case. So who knows? We'll see if the YouTube decides to open up. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know what YouTube's doing. It always feels like they're 3 to 4 years kind of behind the cart when it comes down to their live stuff. But they keep saying they're working on it. They keep saying things are happening and coming along. So it is going to be what it is. The David says, for me, the blue deep dungeon should learn the skills during the run, but maybe that's a lot more work. Chris, what's your ultimate blue mage deep dungeon setup?
You could have it learned during the run, but at that point, I'd want it to work like a totally different system. I would basically kind of move it maybe even like away from Palmanders and let it have like a full 28 or something ridiculous, and maybe that's its whole thing. So at that point, I start to want to reimagine Deep Dungeon to be a different experience and have its own ether pool and have its own thing. So at that point, like I would want it to be something where like maybe you can spend ether pool to make sure that certain abilities are perma unlocked. And so like at that point, I start to let my imagination run a little wild and say, okay, well then what does a blue mage deep dungeon specifically work like? And we're just spending an unlimited amount of dev resources at that point. So I would go way, way, way further if I was just speculating at what I would want it to be. For now, I would settle for just let it in. Just let it in like everybody else. I personally don't care. If they want to separate off the leaderboards to kind of like once a blue mage is in the group, it kind of taints the whole group. That's fine. So there's groups with blue mages, and then solo wise, it's already sectioned out. And start with the old stuff. Start with Palace. What's really fun about that is future deep dungeons, a lot of times to get your feet wet, require Heaven on High and Eureka Orthos both require that you've cleared 50 floors of Palace. And so that would make it like, hey, I want to get into Eureka Orthos. I heard it wasn't too bad with a group. But I have to go do this 50 levels of old content. None of my friends seem to want to do that. Actually, your friends with Blue Mage are totally willing to go do that with you.
Yeah.
They can go melt the first 50 floors of Palace with you, and that will give you enough to hop into Eureka Orthos without Blue Mage. So that's the simple way to do it, is just let it in. Just let it in. Just let it in with its abilities as it sits. You just take your build in, and then the abilities just unlock as they hit various level ranges. And so you just assign it, and they just have an unlock order. And by a couple levels in, you're flying through that. So I don't know. keep it each slot in order with each level. It doesn't matter. But I would love to kind of see something with Blue Mage that starts to breathe life back into it. When there is life in it, it's a really exciting piece of content.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of bummed that the Relic Step this time was not something that could take advantage of Blue Mage. I thought 635 would be the perfect time to push Blue Mage to 80 and then have us farming bicolor gemstones for the Relic. So I can go farm my bicolor gemstones in Shadowbringer's Fates with Blue Mages. And it can just be this combination of things. I'm getting all of this kind of fun feedback.
Right. And that's the synergy that I was alluding to like earlier. It's like that's an exact thing that you feel like maybe this part of the patch, and honestly it probably would, and let's say they were working on it and maybe that was what was targeted. The beauty in them not like verbally committing it allows them to kind of say, hey, we're going to go ahead and move that to this section, and we've seen that happen a few times because development, is a difficult process. And one of the things that like most gamers who don't work in dev like can't even fathom, just like sometimes it's like, well, we thought this was going to be easy. And I think the best phrase when you think about development isn't easy or hard. It's just how much time is this going to take? How much time does it take to turn this around and get that out? And to your point, yeah, Blue Mage going up to the next level cap around this time, allowing that bicolor gemstone to be an integrated step would allow a lot of people to have a little bit more flexibility and decide how they did want to tackle the content. And anything that pushes players out into the open world, I think is a very important thing. One of the things that was a big, weakness of, as much as people were like, oh, we didn't get an exploratory zone. The biggest weakness of Eureka and Baj's Adnor was that it was still instance-based content, not taking advantage of the open world. And so what you end up having is the siphoning, and the technology, hopefully they're working on it to bring that content into the open world content would end up being, I think, a big win, where all of a sudden the servers just say this or this zone in the open world, or the zones in the open world are now all a part of the mega server. And who knows, maybe we'll see that announcement at FanFest now that they have the data center and all the stuff that they have been working on all this whole time. Now Fido says, since all blue spells are level 1, they need to actually figure out how the spells would be obtained in Deep Dungeon. And my whole philosophy behind that is that you learn your spells like you learn your spells, and it just opens up slots so that as you level up through the Deep Dungeon, eventually you have so many slots for the things that you have equipped once you're at the right level. And then you choose as a player, this is the level 1 ability, level 2 ability, because then you could decide to do whatever you wanted to do with it. And you could make a build that will not clear, like a floor or two like that, but that would be your choice to do that. And I think that would be how I would do it. If you were just going to insert it into the current system, you just say, all right, you got, however many slots, and then they unlock over the course of these ranged levels. Put your right skills in the right numbered slot. Otherwise it's going to sit here and it's going to be a struggle. But Chris's point about we've seen their original vision already complete from when it was originally announced. So hopefully this means that they've had time to kind of take that feedback and take it to the next level, so to speak. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say on Blue Mage. Chris, you got any other thoughts, or if there's another comment or anything we can highlight, talk about for a few minutes? I'm game.
No, I think that's good. I think, let's hope for some Blue Mage. It was very first announced at a FanFest, so it is not immune to being announced at FanFest NA and released during the Endwalker patch cycle, because that's what it originally did. It announced FanFest for Shadowbringers during Stormblood is when it was announced, and it released during Stormblood. So during the very expansion where the FanFest was held, not the expansion the FanFest was for. So, there's no rule against that. There's no rule that it has to happen either. That was definitely weird.
Yeah.
The number of times that they announce something at a FanFest and then we don't have to wait until the expansion at the least is rare. But it could happen.
Yeah. And who knows, they could have it on, where you could go at FanFest and go hands-on with it. And then that way they can say, hey, we had a previewed and this is coming in the 0.5 patch or something along that design, which could be even like a step in the relic at some point as that goes. Not necessarily would it be for Blue Mage, but like to Chris's point about colored gemstones and things like that. So, guys, that means I think we're going to wrap up today's show early. Thanks so much for joining us live. Thank you for the likes here on the stream. It's a great way of helping support this and help YouTube recommend it out to more people. Like, favorite, subscribe, and share. Leave a comment below if you're watching this as a VOD. And to that, any VOD watchers out there, you legends, thanks for checking out the live stream. We'll get these clipped up for y'all and put out as videos so that you can hopefully enjoy. And if you guys have topics and things like that that are just pressing or you want more information on, sound off and let us know. Hit us up on Discord, and we will make sure we get that on the schedule. But I'm going to go ahead and broadcast. Chris is going to continue on over on Twitch. The links are all in the description and pinned for y'all. So go hang out, lurk, and who knows, you might be gifted out subs, which is good. Ad-free viewing, which is what we all like and enjoy. All right, guys, ending broadcast, and we will see you next time. Spinning.